Hey, it's Lisa Wimberger here. I'm the founder of Neurosculpting, and I have helped thousands of people learn really powerful tools to regulate their minds and their bodies, including pro athletes, entrepreneurs, and those with serious stress-based illnesses. So I'm really excited to help you do the very same thing through education and some incredible guest experts. And together, we're going to discover the formula to unlock hope. So welcome. Ooh, juicy day with Emily Schromm. So excited. Let me read a little bit about Emily's bio. And it's an understatement, I have to say. When I asked her to send her bio, I was like, that's it? I know that you're doing insane things in the world, but this is her bio. Emily is a creator, an entrepreneur, and a coach, teaching others to heal and connect back to themselves through movement, nutrition, plants, Mother Earth, and I would say her amazing spirit, her bright spirit. She is now taking her Meathead Hippie podcast on the road because guess what? She's living in a van. And she is touring the country, interviewing farmers and creators directly out of her van and having amazing conversations about the planet and healing each other and healing the land. She is the founder of Platform Strength, the Bird Quiz, Empirica Supplements, and she is the author of a book of prose and poetry called The Process, which really is about being a creator. So that's the short version. Emily, I'm so excited to see you in your van with your cat. Oh my God, you never cease to amaze me with the crazy stuff you do. So I want to get into, first of all, how is van life? Like, what is it doing for you?
Oh my God, it's doing everything. You know how these things come up and you don't know why, but you just follow the yes, you follow the heart, and then you're like, oh, that's why. If you think of it too much, if you make too much logical sense out of these things, you'll never do them. So you gotta just fly with it. So
You do know that's not the norm. Like you have to understand this about yourself. This is why I love talking to you, whether it's in the backyard, cutting yarrow, or at your gym. I love talking to you because you go about life and the world truly following your heart, and you sort of assume that's what people do. And I have to tell you, the reason you're so inspirational is because that's not what a lot of people do. And they get to see you do that. So how long have you been living in a van? What in the world prompted it?
right, right. Well, I have my little yarrow with me, by the way.
Oh,
I
yay.
know, the herb that brought us even exponentially closer.
Yes.
Well, okay, and just even what you just said right there, you just kind of nailed it. It's like, if we didn't overthink so much and we did just follow our heart, there's no real intention except to just enjoy your life a little bit more, right? It's like this bliss that we're all trying to find and tap into. And really it's not about, for me, solving the world's problems. That was a big one, or like being the savior of all of this,
And you were there, where you were in that space?
Oh, totally, totally. Where you feel like the burden of saving the world is yours, and anybody who's a healer or a teacher or coach, I'm sure has experienced this or maybe is in it. And so it's really the epiphany with the van life, even more so, is like your job is not to save the world, it's to be as much of yourself as possible, and through that you save the world, which we totally hear these things, but then we embody it, and it's like, oh shit, that's the whole point, is not to feel this heaviness in making the world a better place, because the heaviness is already predominant. It's already.
Do you feel like when you're attached to this idea of like, I have to do something great, I have to save the world, do you feel like that limits you because it's ego, or it limits you because you have an expectation of what that's supposed to look like? Why is that a thing you had to break free from?
Well, because it is ego, it will already in its essence be limited. because
Mm,
it's ego. So that's one thing that really was the light bulb of, if we have the plan and the control, then it's never going to be as big as it could be, because
mm,
divine spirit knows so much more than we do. And as soon as we put it and define it into a box, we just stopped its growth. We just stopped its potential. So that was one thing where I think the van kind of came after a lot of different identity shifts. And I bounced from one to the next, right? Like breaking free is something I'm really great at. Like, okay, I'm
mm-hmm,
a personal trainer, break free. Now I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner. Okay, break free. And we're
mm-hmm,
just moving through. In my book, I talk about this a lot, of like kind of choosing to go up a different side of the mountain and learn more about the pieces that make you whole.
mm.
And yet still, it's still a cycle of finding a box, finding a name, finding a niche to make us feel comfortable. So it was just like, this is enough. Like, enough is enough. What does that mean? So I think, and that probably started 2020, a couple years ago. Pandemic kind of started that opening for everyone,
Yeah.
where there was a limit. And so that deep exploration of self that you preach and share and do so well of, and that all of us are also in that, okay, yes, learning about self. It was the realness of like, well, what patterns still exist? And if I'm just kind of bouncing box to box, could there be more? And how do I do that? And so the simple answer was, my lease ended in Denver. And I was like, I can't even imagine signing a lease anywhere right now. Like,
Yeah,
you
because you were saying like nowhere feels like home.
yeah, nowhere. And so it was like, okay, that is the work. And then I knew, okay, if I need it to be my home, and I'm a Cancer moon, which is, even extra special, home life is really important. I need it to be a red van. I need it to be my route. I need
Wait,
to,
you were so specific in your
I
breaking free
was,
here. It
I
has to be
was.
a red van.
It did.
Why? Why?
But because, well, the root chakra, of course. I
Of
was like,
course.
of
Oh,
course.
silly question. I can't believe I even had to ask that.
Well, it was perfect though, because the second that I colored the van in my head and said out loud to my friend, I think my van's supposed to be red. My sister sent me a message of this van in Iowa, and it was a red van, and I was like, "Oh my God, I think that's it." And I had to go through the process of like, is this really what I'm going to do? But as soon as I mean, everything was so divine. You just are surrendering to it. Like, if it just is easeful right now, more than anything, it's like, what path is easeful? What path is flow? And if it's resistance, there's definitely a good amount of resistance. We know this with strength training at platform, right? Like, I don't think I can do a pull up, but then you push through it and then you get to crush your pull ups, which I saw, which was so amazing, by
Oh
the way.
God, what a journey pull-ups have been.
Totally. They're like just the best way to explain your self-worth and strength training, and then you really can tap into it. So there's always that fine line of, you don't want too much, like, some resistance is healthy, but for me, I am addicted to the resistance, right? So knowing that about myself, it was like, this has to be, the best analogy is, what's your left foot forward, your feminine side first?
Mm-mm.
What would come from that, and just let it happen. And so the simplification of my life, to have everything in this van, including my little cat, and
Mm.
just this real idea of, you have everything you need. And that is what I felt like was the most needed in this kind of new exploration of where I go from here. And how do I really, you know, we all have some sort of weight we're carrying. And I was really feeling it in my body. Certain parts of your body will feel it. Pain and injury will hold it, right? We know this. And so it's like, okay, if your body's telling you all these things, where am I still feeling the weight? Like, I have to hold the weight of the world. And can a literal simplification of my life get me one step closer to, this easeful bliss that is being asked for me to tap into?
Amazing. I have this curiosity. Do you think, had you had this sort of break free mentality and follow your heart mentality years ago, do you think you would have been such a driven athlete? Because my
Mm.
perception of the high performance athletes like yourself, that I also am involved with in other ways, they're extremely achievement oriented and vision oriented, and they have the goal that they hold in mind so they can achieve it. Do you think you could have done that if
Mm,
as yourself today?
such a good question. Well, that's kind of, I translate the physical body to everything. So, it really is even my jobs, right? The careers and the kind of output of businesses and kind of the impact, all these different brands and creations. But it's a deep conversation because most of the time when you're watching an athlete, you can see the demons they're running away from.
Say more about that.
You
Yeah.
you just can see. I mean, this is for anybody, and maybe this is, the beauty of seeing people in their light and their dark, because we all have this. So it's just whether you're very successful at your job or whether you're very successful in the gym, the root of probably 99% of people who are that successful are running away from something and channeling it into something that they can control and is tangible, which is a blessing because it gets them to a certain place.
Is it part
They'll
of the processing?
Yes, it's so
Yeah.
a part of, okay, now I'm here. I made it to the top of the mountain. I won the competition, or I got really successful at XYZ. And oh, I'm not satisfied. Now I come back to the deeper layers of work that were always being asked of me. And now I feel like I can visit them. Whereas
Hmm.
before, you couldn't, so but I still think there is, in this new way, when there is something that really lights you up. So, like for me, in this in between of really driven competitive performance, but also still deep appreciation of my athletic body, there is still a place for people pursuing that without running away from something.
Mm.
And I don't know if anything will spark me in that way yet, but I get tastes of it where I think it's going to come again some way.
I almost feel like that's a whole new frontier of high performance,
Mm.
is the high performance where you are also not running from and you're also not attached to the end goal. I mean,
Ooh.
oh my God, maybe that's your next
Well, I just
thing.
got chills. I really did
Oh.
just get a little goosebump because, well, it's true. We all, there's no guilt to any of it because we get there and hopefully we get there and then we go deeper. Unfortunately, we still see people who stay there. They just start to spiral and feel really not useful in life because
Mm,
their validation was their external performance, right? How the world saw me was my value, and now there's really nothing. So but
mm-hmm.
when you really keep going, you just dig and dig and dig and tap into the layers of connectedness and understanding how multidimensional we are. So then even kind of tying that into what you do, like to have that deep satisfaction of self and not be performing for running away from fear of, body or what it might look like if you didn't do it, and to have just complete bliss and joy and high performance meditation.
Mhm.
Can you imagine all the biohacking that could tie into
Oh my
that?
God, Emily, I'm getting ideas. This is what always happens when we talk. I'm like, oh,
Bird
that's
quiz.
an idea. Okay, what are we doing next? Okay, but I want to go back to something. Um, okay, wait, never mind. Keep going. Keep going with
well
what this could look like because I have some questions brewing.
well, yeah, that's just the bird quiz on crack right there. It's just really taking it to another level.
Yeah. Um, do you want to say anything about what the bird quiz is? Because not many people know what that is. I think it's
Yes,
genius.
I love it so much. It's so funny because today even I just did a little workout, and you go into the gym and step one is teaching people. I always say, like, BYOB, build your own body. Everyone should have
Mm,
the basics to build a strength program and feel comfortable in the gym, right? So once you kind of, it's just like eating healthy food. Like once you feel comfortable in the gym, then you get to play. Then you get to walk into the gym and are like, okay, what's the body need today? And it was so perfect because this is my Impala shirt. Like, there's certain colors that are just like Impala. So I was already wearing this, just like, oh, I think my higher self knew that I needed Impala today. And I went into the dance room and this lady was just dancing. And I was like, oh, shoot, this is an Impala day. And so the bird quiz is just this really, you know, For me, it's 44 questions. My beautiful friend Jennifer just put these questions together, and we created this bird quiz that helps people figure out what space they're in right where their feet are. So I just feel all of us are so tied into this bird Aquarius energy, right? This bird tribe where we see things, we're moving things, we're shifting energy in this big time of transition. Whatever birds mean for you, there's not one person I've met that doesn't connect with a bird. There's just so much magical energy with birds, and they are the fastest going extinct animal, period. So there's
Mm,
deep environmental impacts on their livelihood and on how they are thriving and surviving, and it's just all kind of a big indicator of our current situation in life. It's just such a tangible and metaphorical
mm,
thing. So the bird quiz is kind of knowing we're all birds, but we have to dig deep sometimes to find that energy. And so we created this bird quiz that divides you into one of four archetypes. So you're either the B, I, R, or D, which spells bird, but they are not birds. You're either a beluga for the B, an impala, a rattlesnake, or a deer. And you could also use the elements. So
mm-hmm.
water, air, earth, fire. There's also some really beautiful astrology that ties into this, but it really is a simple way to understand what medicine you need so that you can
Mm,
quickly adapt, right? So many times I was in situations where, this type of meditation would work, or I really would always do this little preventative piece of medicine or support, journaling or talk therapy or certain types of workouts that would get me out of my funk. And then there would be times where it would not work. It was like I had fallen off the cliff and there was no way that was going to help. This just deep, where do I go from here? And so I just kind of see it as we have a toolkit with the bird quiz to really see your preventative and reactive support.
I love it because it feels like a comprehensive archetype tool. So when I think of it and I think of, oh, what is the deer energy, right? Or what is the rattlesnake energy? And the way you break it out, it's like, here's how it shows up in your movement, and here's what you need to unlock it.
Mm.
Here's the kind of movement to unlock it. Here's the kind of practices that would unlock it. Here's the kind of recharging practices when you're in this particular archetype that support you. You even link it to your supplements, to workouts. So you're not just giving, like, it's not like an oracle deck where you're just giving the archetype. You're actually giving a whole proposed protocol, mind, body,
Yeah.
spirit, to then support either the cultivation of that archetype, if that's what you want that day, or the chilling out of that archetype, if that's what you need. And so I find it fascinating, but I go back to your energy. I find it fascinating because you just sort of downloaded this whole thing and it just comes through you. And I've watched you do this where I love that you always have a sketch pad with you. And I've stolen that from you because it's an amazing practice. Because here's what I've discovered. In watching you always have a sketch pad, and no matter what we're talking about, you're always like making little flow charts or bubbles or little notes. What I realized was the fact that the page is blank and it has no lines does something really different, because I was always a graph paper note, college ruled journal kind of person. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Emily's really creative and in flow every time we have a conversation. So I started getting sketch pads. My notes are so much more free.
Ah,
They download so much more directly from what I'm thinking to not censoring it. And just that alone was a practice that I never even got to tell you that I totally stole from you.
I'm so
Look,
glad you told
this
me
is
that.
my sketch pad. I have it
It's
on
a
my lap right now.
that is such a game changer, Lisa. It's like kind of this idea that yes, we are all constrained in enough of our physical world. And what's the wild child that's in us that just wants out? I love that you said that. That's
I
amazing.
totally ripped that from you. It was great. And I've
Take
been
it.
meaning to tell you for a long time. But I do have, I remember the question I want to go back to.
Yes.
Earlier, you were like, you can see the demons people are running from. And this is true in all walks of life, right? But What were you running from? I'm
Hmm.
sure we all want to know. We don't want to talk theory. We want to talk like, what was your, oh shit, I'm running from this?
Ugh. I mean, I don't know if I ever wasn't running, so there was just so every time you heal something, it's because you recognize what you're running from.
Mm.
And that, there's always, I think it started with this big, huge thing that happened at 20 years old, being on reality TV and not really having the tools to deal with that type of exposure.
What
And
does that do to your psyche?
I'm still figuring it out, Lisa. It was such a trip, to really have this, complete, I'm just living my life, and then 4 months later see the world watch you live that was such a really crazy experience. But I always, it comes back to, I had a download about this. It was, you know, we get to choose how fast we want to learn these lessons in this lifetime. We really are like open to learning, and we're going to just go all in. And I'm an extreme person, and that's the life I chose. And so I just keep thinking about this metaphorical and literal mirror that came from reality TV to really see in reverse, and then my reaction to that, and then the pressure cooker of emotion that happened for 10 years after that was the gift of, I never would have had the ability. It maybe would have been, I would have been 90 years old without that tiny experience.
Mm.
And so really seeing like these situations of like, there was, what was the reason? So I think it was always just a deep running away from self. I think all of us are running away from our truest self. And I think it manifests in running away from what we look like in the mirror, and running away from fear of failure, running away from fear of commitment, fear of being fully seen, stop, like kind of this idea that we're all in self-destructive patterns. So it's the recognition of those patterns that pulls us out and helps us heal. So, I mean, it's just myriads of different things I was running away from. But I think in the peak of my fitness world, it was definitely running away from it. Actually, it was like, it was a proving thing. It was definitely an ego thing of me feeling as if to share with the world fitness and nutrition, I had to represent something. I had to kind of tap into a different persona in order to feel as if it was worth being said. Some sort of strange psychology with that. It was different. It was a weird, I don't know, but I'm grateful for it because again, it got me to the layers.
This is really interesting because another one of my guests, Bryant Wood, who also was on a few different reality TV series, also had a life changing exploration of self and has come out of it a completely different person than when he was in it, and had it all accelerated because of that experience. So I'm curious if you think, social media is kind of like a
Mm.
microdose of reality TV in a way. I mean, we don't have the cameras following us. We're actually curating, which makes it, I think, even more dangerous
Worse. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we don't have to actually have the mirror.
Hmm.
Whereas reality TV, when the cameras are with you all the time, it's going to catch you real at some point.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious if you feel like social media has the potential to do that mirror reflection for people, or is it too curated and it's going to make it worse? Like, what's your experience? Because you're also an influencer as well on social media.
Oh, that's such a good question. So my first instinct, if what you just said, is that why it's more dangerous is because we get to choose the persona that we feel um, is really not necessarily who we are. It's what people respond best to. That's the majority, which is the danger of it, especially for young kids and teenagers and 12-year-old girls, right? To see a response and get a dopamine hit off of a part of you that is one fraction of you and maybe a
Mhm.
moment, and then become consumed by that becoming all of you, so that there is that interaction and engagement and maybe it's for a social media brand, maybe it's for your work, right? There's so many layers to that that are terrifying because it means that you are instantly putting yourself into the box that we are starting the conversation of how do we get out of these boxes as fast as
Mm.
possible. So I think it's dangerous in that sense, but what it can be a good tool for, and what I have found is that the mirror comes from the other. So instead, if you as a user or you as someone who's experiencing social media, if you really lean into the feelings of what you're gravitated towards and also what you're repelled by,
Mm.
and you have that conversation with yourself anytime you are triggered, especially when there's something that is, I see this a lot with female to female, is just leaning into what about that actually really bothers you instead of just this instant unfollow, mute, don't want to see.
Oh,
There's some
that is an amazing challenge.
A deep exploration can happen with that.
Wow. Yeah, I find myself sometimes I feel equipped to do that. And I feel the desire to do that, to look at, well, why am I averting? And then sometimes I'm not resourced enough to do that. And I do hit block.
Yeah,
And, I vacillate. And I think this is that you're giving me this great reminder because there's part of me is like, oh my God, this person is a hater of whatever, neurosculpting or the way I position things or the fact that I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm talking about the brain, right? I get those things that come at me. And a lot of times I will entertain them and sort of just like try to feel where the person's coming from and look at why, is it my insecurity that I'm so upset? And then there are other times where like, I don't have time for this. Come on. And I block
totally.
and I move on. And so it's this interesting invitation
Yeah.
to look at what's the reason behind when I do indulge it? What's the reason behind when I don't feel resourced enough to indulge it? I mean,
But
I don't know that.
you're right. Like sometimes you just got to cut it out.
Yeah.
There's definitely when it's more of that. I think it's really because you can always go down the rabbit hole again and again and again of why we feel the ways we
Hmm.
feel. So but then it doesn't let us trust that instinct. So that instinct sometimes is protecting us for a reason. So
Why do you say women to women in particular? I mean, I have my own reasons
yeah,
why I think that.
right. Well, I just have found I've been on a lot of panels, I've been in a lot of conversations that talk about this with social media, where they talk about boundaries and they talk about, really setting it up to where if somebody makes you feel bad about yourself, especially in this phase of really fully accepting the body and whatever stage it's at, if you feel as if you are seeing someone that is causing you to not feel comfortable, you need to block it and end it. And I think that that's not the healing route because what it does is it limits your ability to dig into the shadow of everything you see that you're gravitated towards. It's because you also have that in yourself.
Hmm.
And then everything you're repelled by, especially if you're a user, not if they're coming at you or if there's some sort of interaction where it's like, I need to set that boundary and that block. But if I'm going through social media and there's something that kind of just makes me feel weird, there's always something to learn from that person. And
Hmm.
it's just an interesting thing with women because I do feel there is such a unfortunate disconnect where there's not enough love and compassion and support. There is still a lot of competitiveness and just a need for healing those broken bonds.
And yet we're designed as women to be the social mixer and the social glue and the bonded human to human example.
Yeah,
And it's so ironic that there is this underlying competition energy between women and why, what does that come from? It's
yeah.
not our design.
I know. I know. I think it has to do, if we just go as deep as we want, it just has to do with our own wounds of our own family ties, our own sisterhood, like our sisters in our own life, and just knowing that that's our gift in this lifetime to help heal. So if it's just a generational thing, knowing we're all a part of it and going above and beyond to make sure that there is as close to cohesive and love and support that we can bring, because we're all a part of it in some way. And so just acknowledging our part in it and then going above and beyond to swing that pendulum the other way. And I mean, it's just the construct of the patriarchy, right? It's like to divide and to separate and to kind of keep us away from the power that we have in our womb. And it could go from even the making periods feel as if they are icky and gross, instead of us all sitting in a red tent celebrating
You
our
know,
our death.
this is profound. 'Cause there's so many things I want to respond to. Okay, one thing I want to say is you are a prime example of not dividing women. I mean, I know a lot of powerful women, entrepreneurs, influencers, celebrities, and there's still a polarization that happens with some of them. And you are this amazing example of never, ever bringing that energy of divide. Nobody ever feels the competition energy when they're in your space. There's always this like warmth and inclusion. But I want to say something about the making periods a bonding thing. I never even thought about, I mean, I think as many women grow up, we're taught to just quietly accept the period, don't complain, and we just really desensitized to it. And then I had a hysterectomy in March, and that really spun me into such deep levels of inquiry around what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a woman in a body that had a womb? Right? Because now we have people who identify as women, and there's a very real thing to process around identifying as a woman who actually has a womb, and now you lose it. And that's a different animal than never having one and identifying with being a woman. And I didn't realize the stories in the womb until it was taken from me. And I had to process, I don't have the parts and pieces anymore. Now, if we look at how we all start in utero, we all start the same. Whether you identify as male, female, non-binary, in a physical body, we all start the same, right? We start with the same stem cells and mechanisms that will either create gonads or ovaries. They are identical, right? Whether these things create a clitoris or a penis, they are identical. And whether they become female breasts or a male chest, they're identical. So there's very little to nothing that actually separates a biologically male person and a biologically female. I'm not talking chromosomes. Of course, you're going to look at the, the X and the Y. But there is one structure that undeniably is different in biologically female bodies, and that is the fact that we have a uterus. And it's the one thing that is not the same organ across the species. And it's behind the scenes. Yes, it has we have periods, but all of a sudden you have that piece removed, and now there is zero that separates you biologically from an organ perspective. And that never occurred to me until it was removed. And I went, oh my God, like I spent a whole life carrying a womb and not appreciating it. Of course, I appreciated that I had my daughter. That's the only time I appreciated it. I did not appreciate it when I had my periods. In fact, we try to not have our periods. We take birth control so that we minimize the periods. We take birth control so we don't have to use the womb, right? So I remember traveling, I would double dose on my pills so I wouldn't have a period when I traveled, because who the hell wants to travel with tampons? I mean, all the things we do not to have them. And the only time I appreciated it was when I wanted a child. And then it was gone. And I went, oh my God, I spent a whole lifetime carrying this magical piece inside of me, never appreciated it except for 9 months. And now it's gone. and it had power and wisdom to share with me, and I didn't get it while I had it. So now I'm going to freaking get it after it's gone. And I had to go in and examine, what did it mean to be a woman with a womb? What does it mean to be a woman without one? Where does creation energy come from? Oh my God, there's this whole source behind the womb that's available to all bodies.
Yeah.
Like, just such
Ah.
an exploration why we are not red tenting the
Mm.
shit out of our female bodies and celebrating what this miraculous thing does. And this is not to devalue someone who doesn't have a womb and also identifies as
Mhm.
a woman.
Yeah.
That's not to devalue it. It's just to say that there's a bunch of us with wombs out there that are in an adverse relationship to a very powerful, potent, wisdom creating piece of ourselves. And maybe being in connection with that could actually minimize the thing you said, which is women not bonding with each other. And what could
Mm.
it be like if we could be that non-confrontational bonding force? I don't even know. And it's not my mission to do that. It's my mission to do that for myself. I know my mission on this planet, but I sure hope that's someone else's mission, because I want to go cheerlead that.
Totally. Wow. Lisa, thank you for sharing all of that. That is so beautiful. I also was so curious, and what a process, because it is true, male or female. If you tap in, you feel your ovaries, you feel that creative support, right? It's just sacral energy is sacral energy. And the more we tap into who we really are, there is more androgyny, right? So androgynous, having this beautiful balance, this temperance of masculine and feminine, regardless of what your anatomy is, what comes through you is what comes through you. And it's just such a beautiful place that we're tapping into more and more, even though this is ancient ways, right? The greatest healers were always, you couldn't even tell, are you a male or female? And they wouldn't even identify with either,
Mm-hmm.
because so I think it's just this beautiful awakening. But also, if you do have that relationship, regardless of what it could mean, it doesn't mean you're more powerful or less powerful because you do have a menstrual cycle. But when you can really use it as a tool, there is something very potent about that energy, that it's just like working with the moon cycles. It's your own personal moon that helps you understand when you've let go of something, when you need to rest, when you need to move. There's a deep knowledge that can come from that. But wow, I love hearing that,
It
what you
was
just
it
said.
was a it was definitely a trip and a journey, and it even rippled into my relationship with my daughter, because separate from the identity of being a woman with a womb, there's no denying that was her first home. It's
Yeah.
gone. Like,
Wow.
we had those fires here in Colorado, and it was devastating for people to watch their homes burn and all their material possessions. And that was heart-wrenching. And when I was preparing for the hysterectomy, it was coinciding with when she was turning 18, and we were doing a cutting the cord ceremony, just me and her. But because it was overlapping the hysterectomy, it was a literal, oh my God, I'm actually cutting the cord.
Wow.
I'm burning down the house you first knew as your safety. In fact, the only place that has truly ever been safe for her, because when she came into this world at a very young age, she was witnessing me have seizures and flatlines. So even the house I provided externally, the life I provided, is not half as safe for her as the
Wow.
genetic imprint of what my womb created for her. And I'm not only getting rid of it, but they're going to throw it in a medical waste dumpster. And this is just what happens. And it didn't even occur to me until she and I were doing our ceremony that I am burning down her home.
Hmm.
And she spun a little bit. There was like a week after the cutting of the cord ceremony where the two of us were very uprooted. Like, how do we find that epigenetic place of safety that is so cellularly embedded because I had her home inside me intact. And
Wow.
it was such a trip. It's still unfolding. I'm still trying to figure it out. But, um, for all the people who've had babies or not, that is a home space of creation. And when it's negated, or burnt down or ripped out of you or denied, that brings up stories and shadows and demons. And so this came to me when you were talking about, like, what are we running from, I,
Wow.
I had to look at what the hell I had been running from my whole life with my identity as a female, because I was way more comfortable with male social circles, way more comfortable not being in competition with women. And I felt like being in a group of women, I didn't even know how to do that.
Mm.
I didn't want to I didn't feel comfortable being excessively feminine. It wasn't my true self. And I didn't feel comfortable denying my feminine. I didn't find my place. And I'm like, I don't even understand any of this. And I'm a person who identifies with the gender they were born with. So if I don't understand it and I'm in congruence, well, shit, this must be really confusing to
Yeah.
people who are out of congruence with the body they live in. And I don't know. I guess all this to say, I don't think any of us have it figured out. So, people of the world, who the freak knows? Like, I don't know. I'm still figuring out what it means to be a woman. And now I have parts and pieces missing. And my daughter has an energetic space that is no longer, I don't know. It's a whole trip. I think a book's
Wow.
coming. Certainly a personal journey's coming out of this, but it is wild.
Oh, that is so
Wild.
beautiful to hear. I love
Um,
hearing that. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah. So Emily, I want to round out with maybe one or two things that you want to share about what you're excited about creating, and maybe one or two things you want to share for people to just take in their hearts and
Hmm.
seed forward.
Oh, well, the womb talk is so important in this moment because it is winter, right? We just got a first snow, my first snow where I'm at. So it's really this interesting shift of season and understanding of all the work and all the healing that I have done will not continue to replace a need to be held in my own hypothetical womb, whether,
Mm.
this like deep, deep, yes, we want to mother, yes, we want to nurture, yes, we want to heal, but
Your
there's
red van womb.
my red van. Yes, and I named her. So there's a Mayan goddess. Do you know of the goddess Ixchel?
Yes.
So when I said it, it was like I said her name's Eggshell, and at the same time, my friend goes, "It's like an eggshell." And so I was like, we just said shell and shell. I was like, oh my God, it is my little shell. And so I instantly have turned this into
It's
this
your
little,
I shell, the shell for the I am.
ooh, that is so good. So the eggshell, the eye shell. So yes, finding our womb. What does that mean? Where do we all need to be held? And where are we giving ourselves space for that, or asking that and really leaning into the reciprocity of the people in our life to not be the only caretaker, to also be caretaken or taken care of. And that's such healing in and of itself, right? That's
Mm.
hard for very hyper independent people and kind of the people who, again, hold that weight on their shoulder, but it is so necessary. And so really leaning into that and understanding any relationship with womb or femininity or, kind of creation, nothing happens without this winter, without this deep,
Mm.
safe space to just be held in a womb of whatever that looks like for you, van or house or
Mm.
meditation practice or therapist or whatever it could be. So that's been really strong for me, is not neglecting the inner child that is always talking and is always there with some
Mm.
of these big shifts and changes. And
um, just totally the path I'm on, because we definitely want to create, and we need to always be creating because we are creators. But there's a difference between creating for just joy and pleasure, and then the self-destruction that comes from my creating and then I must do something with it.
Mm.
So this kind of stopping point, like stopping it before it gets to real tangible outcomes, and exploring, because it definitely lights me up to build a website or make a pitch deck or pull a new brand together. There's definitely things that give me life, but then there's that recognition of, even in this sense that it's a full moon right now going to new moon. So following those cycles as closely as possible so that we're not pushing up a hill when the energy all around us is saying to stop and hibernate.
Mm.
And that's especially true too, because how astrology, and Anthony has so much more to add to this conversation about astrology, but Mars is in retrograde. There's just deep knows, like, deep things that are saying stop and slow down.
Mm.
And when I don't listen to them, my body hurts. The other day, I felt my left foot started hurting. I like actually thought I broke my foot for a second. I was like, oh no, the left foot. And that's the foot that I have my mermaid tattoo on. So I'm like, the mermaid is speaking. And the mermaid is like, stop moving, just be held instead of feeling as if you need to hold. So that's been really strong for me and really just on my heart in this time.
Mm.
And so the things I'm working on are really blissful, like the conversation of the bird quiz that we talked about. Like, okay, yes, this beautiful fun way of interacting in the world and embodying and kind of giving people tools. That's creative.
Mhm.
That's fun. That lights me up, but not pushing into too much of the, but I feel that this deep rest we're all being asked of because of the way the eclipses have just happened and the astrology is, it means that our spring is going to be very potent. I
Mm.
feel a deep like buildup happening, and the greater we rest, the greater we can,
Oh,
boom,
I love
explode.
that. I love that. The importance of rest and consolidation and
Yeah.
integration and metabolization.
Yes. And think, all these conversations and podcasts I'm having about regeneration and regenerative farming and regenerative practices. It's this total mirror of, then what does that look like for you? What does that look like in your own life? And regeneration isn't a beautiful process. It's a really deep, shadowy, dark system and process that it is beautiful at the end of it, because
Mm.
there is all the changes and alchemy that allow something that was once dead to now produce life. But in order to get to that point, there's just such a deep dive into the shadows that, um, it's like the cave. It's just kind of this. I posted this picture the other day of, it said my darkness and then my light, and it was, the light was a woman about to go in the cave, and the darkness was a woman that said, see you in a bit.
Oh
It's
my
just
God.
like
I love that.
choosing the cave. What is the cave we choose? Giving ourselves the support we need, and then just letting us feel the cave,
Mm.
the scary noises and the things we can't see and the cold air, and just really then deep appreciation for the things that we, the gold, the glitters, that visualization was really helpful for me. And also I'm going to a lot of caverns. There's caverns everywhere in the Midwest, like Tennessee, Missouri. It's crazy. So caves are very literal in my
Caves are
life.
it for you right now.
Yeah,
Caves,
they are.
wombs, the little red band, the shell, the
Yeah,
winter, the hibernation.
totally.
You're living the season right now.
I am.
You
And
are.
I want so badly for it to be spring, Lisa. I want to act. I want to do. I want to, but it's like, okay, this is why I have a van. Is there's no way I can avoid the
The season.
cycles, the
Oh,
seasons.
that's brilliant. Okay, so I want to just say the 7 things that really landed with me after, there's a million, but I'm only going to say 7. The first one was You have to be yourself in order to save the world instead of trying to be the person that saves the world. The second one was when you're in control energy, it's never as big as it could be. The third was that life should be about finding ease and flow. The fourth was the phrase you said, left foot forward. And that was the feminine first. I think the world needs that now, whether you're a man, a woman, a non-binary, the world needs the left foot forward. The fifth was that if you look, you can actually see the demons you're running from. The sixth was the danger of getting the dopamine hits off a fraction of you. And the seventh was, to explore and inquire when we are in the trigger or the adverse, the repulsion, and invite the conversation of why? What are we seeing in the mirror here? Emily, as always, I love our conversations. I miss your presence in physical form, but
I miss you too.
Yeah, but I love our conversations. I can't wait to have more. And can't wait to watch more videos of, your co-pilot cat looking out the window as you drive. And I'm so excited. So how can people find out more from you?
So, Lisa, I love our conversations too. We just have the best. We got to compare our human designs one day.
Yeah.
Something lights up in a very
Yes.
special way. So my Meathead Hippie podcast is on any podcast platform, and then emilyschromm.com or Emily Schromm on Instagram is kind of the main places and spaces.
Fantastic. Everybody go check out Emily, listen to Meathead Hippie, and we will definitely do this again.
I can't wait.
Thanks.